Hello and welcome back to the Pitchside Podcast. I'm your host, the HOD of the BSB. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version of this podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, enable notifications to receive all the updates from these episodes of the podcast and all other content on the channel. Listen on Spotify, Google Podcasts or any other platform. And of course, join us for more. You're welcome to episode 164. We start the episode with some quick news roundup. Let's start from Italy, as Gennaro Gattuso was announced the new coach for Fiorentina. That comes, of course, after exiting Napoli, although it comes as a surprise, really, that he exits Napoli despite the good season that he had with them and that he almost made it to the Champions League football. But it is what it is in Italy, and that's what will happen. Another Italian manager, Massimiliano Allegri, is reportedly close to Real Madrid. Of course, the future of Zidane is still up in the air, but the discussions are currently held within Real Madrid, and according to a lot of reports, Massimiliano Allegri is the closest to be the next coach for Real Madrid. Next, and in Germany, Hansi Flick was officially announced as the next manager for the German national team post Euros. Of course, he takes over from Joachim Löw, who spent over 15 years in the club, in the national team, of course winning the World Cup alongside Hansi Flick as an assistant coach, and it was only the natural next job for Hansi Flick after winning everything with Bayern Munich. Moving on to players now, and Fernando Torres, who hung up his boots in August 2019, decided to return to football after less than 2 years in retirement in Japan. Of course, he's returning. He's going to be announcing the club. He's going to be joining on Friday, and the speculation is big over where he's going to go. Barcelona, Juventus, all the options are there. And one other player comes out of retirement, another player goes into retirement. Reportedly, Gareth Bale wanting to exit Real Madrid and Tottenham and wants to retire altogether, reportedly to play golf. I don't know how true this is, but apparently Gareth Bale really wants out. Georginio Wijnaldum, the Liverpool midfielder, is close to Barcelona now than he ever was. Of course, the deal is really close to happening. He still have, his contract is up for grabs this season, and he's going to go on a free for Barcelona, which is going to be a good deal at least for them, alongside Sergio Aguero. I don't know what will be good in it, but at least he's more agile than Aguero and better than him. Moving on, and to France, Christophe Galtier announced that he's joining Nice, apparently, in France. He's leaving Lille literally 2 days after winning the Ligue 1 title with them in a great campaign for that side. Of course, his future is coming down between Marseille and obviously Nice in France and somehow Napoli in Italy, but apparently he's closer to joining Nice. The club isn't just going to be raided of its coach, it's going to be raided of its goalkeeper, Mike Mignon, who's apparently joining Milan, while Gianluigi Donnarumma potentially could be leaving if it is the case, of course, but apparently with Milan being in the Champions League, there is less of a chance than that. And also their defender Boubakary Soumaré, who apparently going to be interested from Leicester, with Leicester of course planning a transfer overhaul, bringing him and bringing Hudson Edouard and as well Ryan Bertrand from Southampton as a left back. It's going to be, I think, a repeat scenario from Monaco from 2017 and Lille themselves in 2012. Let's talk properly about the episode now. Let's get into our first subject here on the episode. It's close to the Euros now. We're pretty much in the run of in the final run towards the Euros on the 11th of June, and that means the squads are starting to get announced, obviously, in around Europe, and England was one of the first major squads to be announced, obviously, ahead of the Euros. Gareth Southgate announced a provisional 33-man squad ahead of the Euros. That is going to be trimmed down to 26, of course, upon the 1st of June, which is the deadline for submitting the squads. And there is no real surprises if you think about it. I mean, it's pretty much the normal deal for Gareth Southgate as of late. You expect the usual suspects to be there, the likes of, the Harry Maguires, you expect the Carl Walkers, the Kieran Trippiers. Reece James has been there. Trent Alexander-Arnold back in the good graces for Gareth Southgate, but it is a 33-man squad, so he could be potentially chunked out from the squad, who knows. But obviously the big surprises, if you want to count them as big surprises, are of course the omissions of the Burnley goalkeeper Nick Pope, Eric Dier, no Eric Dier of course, as I mentioned, no Patrick Bamford, and no Danny Ings. These are the choices that are really talked about in the media, of course. I mean, some would say maybe Patrick Bamford out of all of those is the real question mark why he wasn't called up. I mean, he has some incredible stats, by the way, in the Premier League, scoring 17 goals in the Premier League and playing 37 matches. I mean, he almost scored. I mean, he scored more goals than than Dominic Calvert-Lewin in the Premier League, and Dominic Calvert-Lewin played less than him. I mean, played 32. Maybe that's the reasoning why. I mean, 1 goal of a difference, but still, Patrick Bamford has been a big part of Leeds' incredible season. Has been a big part in them finishing 9th this season. They finished above Everton, and he's been an incredible piece for the club. Nick Pope, I personally would have gripes even with not picking Nick Pope, because I really like him. I really rate him as a goalkeeper. I think he's one of the important parts of Burnley, and for a defensive team, having a good keeper like that is a real important part of it. James Tarkowski also, if you didn't know, by the way, I know his name sounds Polish, but James Tarkowski is English indeed. If you didn't realise that, James Tarkowski is English, and could have been called up for the squad. I mean, he's a decent defender really, and could have been called for the squad. I mean, if you're gonna call Ben White and Ben Godfrey, you should be calling James Tarkowski. Really, he's a good shout. Elsewhere, really no surprises again. The usual suspects are there. There is a bloated forward line. You look at the lineup up front. There is Dominic Calvert-Lewin. There is Phil Foden, Jack Grealish. Apparently, if he's fit, Mason Greenwood, Harry Kane, Marcus Rashford, Bukayo Saka, of course, deserves a call-up. I think the best player for Arsenal by a mile. Jadon Sancho, Raheem Sterling, and Ollie Watkins. In the midfield, I think this is the only line where he couldn't have really picked up any other players, because you look across the board in the Premier League, and most of the midfield lines of any Premier League club are like one English player, and there's like two others around, like almost cherry picking, and that is why he brought Jude Bellingham from Borussia Dortmund, because the midfield lines in the Premier League are not exactly English enough. Obviously, there's some players that are going to be trimmed out. The questions are who will be those players trimmed out of these 33 to make the final 26. I would make some speculations really. I would go for probably Aaron Ramsdale in the goalkeeping lineup, in the department of the goalkeeping. I would say, Aaron Ramsdale. I really think he will be trimmed out. In the defense, I assume it would be the Bens, Godfrey and Ben White. I assume they would be the ones getting the kick out from the squad. I don't really I mean, yes, you could talk about the inclusions of new names and all of that, but I don't think that Ben White and Ben Godfrey are necessarily your big names that you wanna involve. I mean, the fact that Tyrone Mings isn't there, obviously because he's injured and all of that, it's unlucky for him to not be a part of that squad, although he had a great season with Aston Villa as well. So there's again, if we're gonna nitpick on this squad, we can do that. And again, like the fact that I'm talking about no Bamford and no Ings and no Dier and no Nick Pope is quite the nitpicking. I certainly think that probably out of those four, maybe Eric Dier doesn't deserve the call up. If we're going to call those four up, I think Dier is going to be the less deserving of the four. Nick Pope certainly deserves a chance. Why not? I would put him instead of Sam Johnson any day of the week. Again, if I'm taking someone from a lower league team, I will take James Tarkowski. Why Ben White? Ben Godfrey, I mean, Michael Keane is right there. Like, seriously, Michael Keane is right there. How you could not call him up if you want to call someone from Everton? Like, seriously, you haven't called him up. He's been part of the last European squad for England that made it to the internationals the last time out. So why don't pick that guy up? I mean, it's really, really weird. Again, overall, the squad is pretty I mean, it's pretty understandable, pretty expected. There's no real surprises in it. Again, the midfield, it couldn't pick a better line, really. In the attack, we could debate some options. In defence, I think the usual suspects in defence are there. You have Luke Shaw, you have Chilwell, you have Alexander-Arnold and Reece James. That's going to be quite a nice battle. I think both of them are staying, and Reece James and Alexander-Arnold will have, I think, a good battle over the course of the next couple of friendlies that England are going to be playing. But also there is one major problem, I think, for Gareth Southgate, is that some of those players, or at least a lot of those players, are going to be playing either the Europa League final, which is on Wednesday. We did a preview on that yesterday, go check that out. And also they're playing the Champions League final on Saturday. You look at, for example, Dean Henderson, could be potentially in the Europa League final, good start on Wednesday. You have Ben Chilwell playing in the Champions League final, Reece James playing in the Champions League final, Luke Shaw playing in the Europa League final. You have Kyle Walker playing in the Champions League final for City, John Stones as well playing for Man City. You have in the middle of the park, you also have the attacking department, at least. There's Phil Foden and there's Mason Mount in the middle. So I mean, those guys are not going to be joining the national team squad until probably the 1st of June, like the proper time the squad is submitted. So probably those ones are going to be involved in the final squad. There's no doubt about it. So whatever training is going to be had, whatever sort of preparation is going to be had with those players. It's going to be had with the the Champions League and Europa League players, with not being included in the final squad. Again, overall, this is a pretty predictable squad, I would say. Gareth Southgate explained his reasoning why he picked up a 33-man squad. I think it's the same problem for Italy as well. They picked 33 and they will have to trim out 7 players, which is, if it goes down to the choice, I think it's going to be harsh, especially when you didn't have any sort of friendlies before it. I mean, you're going to go straight in the Champions League final to the friendlies before the Euros, which are going to be had with the proper 26-man squad. So you need to make the choice before June the 1st. You're not going to, I mean, if the choice is based on, on a performance-based thing, I don't think that is the case. I think it's going to be the choice maybe based on a personal preference for Gareth Southgate, because you didn't have any internationals with those players in the squad. Certainly you don't have a straight reason to kick out Ben White and Ben Godfrey, for example, and Aaron Ramsdale without playing in a friendly for the national team and showing what they're worth. They could be really good, I would say. Even as weird of choices as they are, I think they could be really, really decent. Again, in the end, it looks like a great squad. They have so much talent up front. I think it will create all sorts of problems for Gareth Southgate, who likes to play a 3-5-2. We'll see how he does that 3-5-2 with those kind of players, particularly with the quote-unquote lack of, he basically has 3 wing-backs in his side. He has wing-backs, he has right-backs and full-backs. He has Luke Shaw, who can be both, who has Reece James can be both, Trent Alexander-Arnold can be a full-back and a wing-back, Ben Chilwell can do the same as well, Kieran Trippier can do the same as well, Kyle Walker can do the same as well. It can be a third centre-half. So there's the options. He's spoiled for choices. I think for the English media, this is going to be disappointing if they don't make it, and all the eyes will be on Gareth Southgate for this one, because they would think that this is a bigger squad, a better squad than the one they had in the World Cup. Although there's no much of a big difference. The addition of the youngsters really is a big difference, but I assume that since the last time out, England have improved a lot, I would say, and there was a lot of talent coming off in the Premier League. Obviously, we'll wait and see how the squad will do, who's going to be the players trimmed out of that squad, and definitely we will see how the final 26 list will look for Gareth Southgate. Moving on, and from the Euros preparation, all of that, let's talk about the proper season, and we're back in reviewing and putting in retrospective the season that we have, and now it's time to talk about Serie A. Arguably, I would say the most surprising of title changes, I think, between Juventus, who spent 9 years over the top of the Scudetto, and Inter Milan, who won it this season. Obviously, I was really having a doubt about it since last season, since Juventus really performed badly in the end of last season and barely saved their 9th Scudetto in a row. It wasn't as celebrated, I think, as the others, because really Juventus felt undeserving for it, but definitely this season Inter Milan deserved to win the trophy, and that's why we're going to be starting with them when we're talking about their respective of the season. They started really, really they were favourites even before they started. I mean, they were second last season. They they were improving their squad really. Lukaku was hitting on all sort of levels. Him and Lukaku Martinez were having one of the best sort of partnerships in the world in terms of in terms of attacking flair. They were really building a squad. Nicola Barella was improving. The coming of Vidal really added a bit, if not, it didn't add much, but it added at least a little bit of security to that midfield of Inter Milan. You have Handanovic being one of the best goalkeepers. You have a security in the defence with the likes of Bastoni, Skriniar and De Vrij being a pretty much consistent three in the back. Achraf Hakimi being one of the best wing backs in the world, proving to Real Madrid why they should be regretting selling him and letting him go actually every day. You have again Nicola Barella being one of the best midfielders in the world at the moment, not just in Italy. I mean, certainly all the spores that will be directed towards them and all the credits, all the plaudits will be absolutely deserved. A side like Inter Milan completely dominated, I think, Serie A this season. If you look at it, they started strong. They had a bit of a hiccup in midway, of course, particularly after leaving and exiting the Champions League early on in the group stages. But maybe that's helped them. Maybe that's the biggest factor that helped them. I think everybody agrees that this is the biggest point that helped Inter Milan win the Scudetto this season. The fact that they didn't have European football, they didn't have distractions in the midweek, they could focus on every game in Serie A with the squad that they have, which was... which let's not forget, it was raided with COVID and injuries at the start of the season. They had a lot of players injured. They had the likes of Kolarov injured. They had Bastoni injured. They have Darmian injured. They had Ashley Young injured. They missed Hakimi for a point. They missed Brozovic for a point. Perisic for a point. It looked for all intents and purposes that the Inter Milan squad was pretty depleted at the start of the season, but then they picked themselves up again with no European football that distracted them, unlike Juventus and Milan. Or to be fair, I mean, Juventus barely leapt over the group stage to be eliminated in the round of 16th. There's not so much difference between both. But with the already impressive performances that Inter Milan were putting, you can add to that the fact that they had a whole week to focus on the games, so they had they almost had no excuses for losing the title. I mean, the title is theirs if Antonio Conte knows anything, and if there's any coach who knows anything about winning one season title and focusing on one sort of objective, it's going to be Antonio Conte. He did that in Chelsea, he did that in Juventus, and he's doing that in Inter Milan. And it paid off big time. And again, it's considered probably a betrayal from Juventus fans to see Antonio Conte taking Inter Milan to the squad, breaking the domination that he started with Juventus back in 9 years ago, when he ended up winning the first of 9 Scudettos in a row. And not just that, I mean, embarking on 3 season journeys with them, and then they reach the next level, being in Champions League finals and all of that. But I feel like the achievement for Inter Milan feels better. I don't know why. I mean, there's just a feeling of differency between the achievement with Juventus. I mean, even winning 3 in a row, and then winning this Scudetto with Inter Milan, because this felt different, this felt fresh, this felt absolutely well deserved again, and you felt like in the end there was no doubt really that Inter Milan are going to be winning this Scudetto after defeating AC Milan in the derby. It was pretty much a train going down from Inter Milan this season, a train going straight towards the right station, which is winning the Serie A Scudetto overall. We can't spoil the winners, we can't spoil the champions without talking about their arch nemesis in the season, without talking about, probably, for my money, and in regards to the performances, in regards to the expectation, the worst performing team in Serie A, Juventus. That is, I think, undisputed. If you want to talk about teams performing badly, I think Juventus are the real deal when it comes to being the worst side. Again, it's comparatively the expectation. I'm not going to say Spezia are the worst side. The expectation is to survive in Serie A, and pretty much did that. But I'm talking about Juventus here, a side that won 9 in a row, looking for 10 in a row, a side that has Cristiano Ronaldo in it, a player who they bought to dominate everything, including the Serie A, and win the Champions League and beyond. They managed to put on a miserable season. And listen, I don't know how you can expect that, but being in the top 4, winning the Coppa Italia ain't going to save that. Maybe that's on paper will save Pirlo, but that's not going to make people or fans forget how bad the season was, how bad Juventus were, how middling they were at certain points, how absolutely undeserving of a top 4 spots they were. Those guys were in the middle of the table at certain points. They were 6th and 7th, by the way. We shouldn't be forgetting that. They were at that point at a certain stage of the season. In the end, they managed the top 4. They snuck in, basically with the stupidity of Napoli and their ineffectiveness. And then you have Pirlo, who's a whole worm case on its own. I mean, you cannot really talk about Juventus without talking about Andrea Pirlo. I mean, it was his first managerial job. I mean, considering it is his first, we could give him a pass for this one, but for the players Juventus have, the squad they have, it's not weak, by the way. It still needs improvement, but it's not a weak squad. This squad has Cristiano Ronaldo. This should be dominating everything and should be in the forefront of every competition. But they weren't. They were pretty far from SerieAReview, and it was pretty clear, I think, halfway through the season, for anyone who's watching, that Juventus have no hopes in winning and winning the Serie A, have no hopes in creating a run together. For some reason, people were expecting them to create a run together, to make a, 10, 12, 15 matches unbeaten streak, maybe even victories in a row, like make this miraculous run like they did back in 2014 as well, under Antonio Conte, surprisingly when they won 25 in a row, and that was like a ridiculous amount of points that they managed to do this season, 2014-15 season. They amassed 102 points or whatever. People were expecting them to make a run like that and win the Serie A, but that didn't happen. And if you know anything about football, it can't happen when you have an average performing squad. Not an average squad in terms of players, but an average performing squad. And I insist on the difference between that. Because you look at the quality of those players, you have De Ligt, could be one of the best defenders in the world on his best day. You have Cuadrado, you have Wojciech Szczesny, who's an underrated goalkeeper, I would say. Maybe not the best in playing with his foot on the back, like the likes of Neuer, for example, and Ter Stegen, but I think in terms of shot stopping, he's as underrated as goalkeepers could come. He joins the list of the Eastern European goalkeepers that are pretty underrated, the likes of Martin Dubravka, Jan Oblak, and all of that ilk. It's pretty much a list of its own we may talk about later on. So Juventus, average performing squad, insist on that word, not average squad in itself, an average performing squad, not exactly knowing what to do with it. Andrea Pirlo's inexperience didn't exactly help. The exit from the Champions League and all of that put so much pressure on Juventus, and in the end, the fact that they managed to make it into the Champions League next season is quite miraculous. Obviously, it affected, not being in the top 4, being in the Champions League could have affected a lot of things, including Cristiano Ronaldo, who could have easily told them, I want to leave, which between us would have been better for Juventus. Saving his wages and buying other players probably would be better for them, but since he's staying, it's the same grind all again next season, and the improvements are needed for Juventus if they want to be back in Serie A next season. We go from a negative surprise to a positive surprise, and overall it is, I think, one of the best stories of Serie A this season in AC Milan. And why I'm saying that, context is king. AC Milan haven't been in this position for a decade. Literally, they haven't been second in the league for a decade or so. The last time they were competing for the title in Italy, it was 2010, 2011, when they won Scudetto in 2011, and since then they handed the domination over to Juventus, and they couldn't be seen ever since. Being back in the Champions League, and despite the fact that in the start of the season they were competing for the title, quote unquote, but we all knew that at a certain point they will drop because they haven't been in that position for a while. The players are new to such pressure. The manager himself is new to such pressure in Stefano Pioli, so you knew that they're going to drop. So overall, it was a great season for them. We saw a lot of good things about them. The squad understands each other. At the very least, there's a lot of players who are really, really growing up in that squad. Ismail Bennacer, Frank Kessie improved probably his best season with AC Milan shirt. Then you have Çalhanoğlu, Ante Rebic having a decent season, Theo Hernandez being arguably the best player for Milan this season. All in all, it was a great campaign for AC Milan. Again, like considering the expectations for them before the campaign, and the fact that most people wanted them just to be back in the Champions League where they belong, I think they achieved that, and then some. Ending the second in the table behind Inter Milan is not as bad as it looks. Again, it might sound bad considering the course of the season, how things changed and ebbed and flowed over the course of the year, but I think for AC Milan, it's definitely a good season, an important season, and return to the Champions League would really only be a positive thing after years of obscurity, really, in Europa League and not making Europa League football in the first place at some seasons. Elsewhere, I would say overall, the league was exciting, by the way. There's a lot of excitement about Serie A this season, and exciting not just in terms of the top 4 race or the fact that there is a lot of interesting bits and parts for the title races and for the top 4 battles in Italy, but exciting in overall, as in the games are exciting, the style is exciting. You cannot say that the Italian league is defensive anymore. You cannot say that about the last 2-3 seasons or so, which is again more than what you can say for other leagues that normally are exciting but they don't. I think Serie A in terms of pure match levels, I think is one of the best this season. Exciting, thrilling, goals galore. I mean, it's not as cagey as it sounds. Maybe a decade ago or more than a decade ago. It's really open. It's really exciting, and one of the most exciting sides about it were Napoli, who unfortunately just missed out on the top 4. You have Roma, started well but then finished the season in a bad way, and they're playing in the Conference League, which is a horrific sort of prospect to look at, really, from any kind of perspective. You have Lazio, who again, they've been fine for the start of the season but then dipped just like their Roman counterparts, but at least they're playing Europa League football. Sassuolo being a decent surprise for the season. They almost play in the Europa Conference League, but Roma just nicked that place out in the last fixture or so. The most disappointing, I think, overall, I would say Torino, who've been fighting for relegation, and elsewhere, I think the best surprise, I would say Spezia, from down the table. They really made it hard for some teams down there, and made it hard for some big teams to get results out of them, and they really deserved surviving in the Serie A. So that's overall the season perspective. I would say again, it was pretty exciting. Inter Milan deserved to win the trophy. Juventus deserved to lose it, and AC Milan are back in the Champions League. Those are, I think, the biggest points you could take. That's it for this episode. I was with HD of the PSP. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version of this. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, enable notifications to receive all the updates from these episodes of the podcast and all the content on the channel. Follow us on social media site PSP_pod on Instagram, and listen on Spotify, Google Podcast, or any other platform. And until tomorrow, I will see you soon. Goodbye.